So it's my real pleasure to introduce friend and colleague, Professor John Bridgewater, an international authority on systemic therapy for cholangiocarcinoma, biliary tract cancers. He's going to be giving us updates on trials and immunotherapy.
Thank you, Shahid, and tremendous to be here as ever. So here is a brief description of the current trial environment and the value of immunotherapy in this disease. And I realize I'm just a warm-up act to the case discussions coming up, so I'll move on. This is the result of the last series of trials that we've done. And this is in adjuvant treatment, so after surgery, first-line treatment, and second-line treatment. And it's, I summarize it on one slide. This is Juan and I, the best part of our work for approaching 20 years. So it's taken a long time to establish this, but arguably this has formed the backbone for what comes, and critically has told the world that it is possible to do clinical trials in this uncommon cancer. Nobody believed us to begin with. We were one of the first people to apply for a grant to do the ABC2 study, and the CRUK were in fact very good about that. This is the list of the ABC studies that we have running, and thank goodness we have a bit of a brand now in terms of what we can offer. We've run through a number. These are the ones that are currently running or about to start. ABC12 you heard from Mairead about yesterday. ABC10 I'll tell you about in a minute is about to start. Details of all of these are available and have formed the background really for clinical trial activity through both nationally and internationally. So first of all, around immunotherapy. So these were the. So what is immunotherapy? Immunotherapy is an antibody. It's stuff that we make against infections the whole time. Except this thing is engineered to release your own immune system to fight the cancer, and it's specifically. It works specifically well if you happen to have something called mismatch repair deficiency, which is where there's lots of targets for these antibodies to hit. This isn't very common. This was the original study of what they call checkpoint inhibitors against a whole range of different cancers. And if you include the ampullaries, there are four biliary tract cancers in that cohort, and three of them did very well. One of them did not. Everything below the line is doing terribly well, and everything above the line is not. And you can see it's a relatively small, this little grey pie chart bit here, it's a relatively small number of patients who have this mismatch repair deficiency. Mismatch repair deficiency is a test that is done on the original biopsy on everybody. It should be done on absolutely everybody with cancer. One of the reasons being the very effective immunotherapy treatment that you can receive. And consequent on this, pembrolizumab, which is one of these checkpoint inhibitors, is now recommended by NICE for pretty much for everybody with mismatch repair deficiency, or the other name for it, slightly different way of testing it, essentially, is called microsatellite instability. So this thing, DMMR, mismatch repair deficiency, TMB, tumor mutational burden, it's another way of assessing how prickly these cancers are. Occurs actually very, very uncommonly in biliary tract cancer. It occurs in maybe 1% to 2%. It may appear to occur slightly more often in patients with this abnormality, the BRCA abnormality. It's on the list of genes that we should be testing for, but it is really relatively uncommon. So people with biliary tract cancer and mismatch repair deficiency should receive immunotherapy of some type. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter which. and that results in incredibly good outcomes. But unfortunately, this is a very small, a relatively small number. Despite this, the immunotherapy was in fact tested in all patients with advanced biliary tract cancer, and this is the famous TOPAZ-1 protocol. I think that this was presented about 2 years ago, something like that. And in fact, there are some updated data about it at this meeting presented by AstraZeneca. And essentially, it was the standard that we had at the time, the standard chemotherapy of cisplatin and gemcitabine, with or without the AstraZeneca version of pembrolizumab, which is called durvalumab. And this recruited, it was a very good study, recruited very well, and Juan and colleagues published this approximately a year and a half ago. And this is what we call the survival curve on the right-hand side here. It was really, and you can see the red line is the people who had the immunotherapy, and the blue line is the people who did not have the immunotherapy. And you can see as things go out, and I think the curve from this meeting looks somewhat better than this, but you can see as time goes on, the people who had the immunotherapy do better, and the survival of patients over a long time is notable. This was repeated using pembrolizumab in another study, the 966 study. And this happened despite the fact that one of the markers for whether immunotherapy is going to work or not, this PD-1 expression, didn't really show very much in this particular cancer. So the big question, and it still is a big question, and it's great to hear that Juan and the CCF have supported some work looking into this, is what tells you whether you're one of these people who does very well on immunotherapy and the chemotherapy. We don't know. We don't know, but looking at this, it's clear that immunotherapy helps a small number of people, but it helps them incredibly, to a very great extent. In other words, it's useless for most people, but for some people, it's absolutely fantastic. And that's the outcome of the immunotherapies in first-line treatment, consequent upon which durvalumab, which is the AstraZeneca compound, is now NICE recommended. So what comes next? Well, is immunotherapy any good after the first line? So you've had your chemotherapy, you've maybe even had durvalumab in chemotherapy. Is the next line of treatment, is immunotherapy any good in that? And these are French data from the PRODIGE 57 studies. So most of these French studies are called PRODIGE now, and it used a combination of immunotherapies and chemotherapy. And the results, it has to be said, are mixed. These are preliminary data that were presented just at a meeting a couple of years ago. We haven't had the final set of data yet. So we still have to hold fire on whether we think immunotherapy works after the first line of treatment. So where do we go? What studies are coming up? And I'll show a few studies that are coming up, and I'm very happy to take any questions about them as we go through. This is emphatic. Doug's told you all about that, really. I don't need to say too much more, but this is the proton beam therapy prior to transplantation for cholangiocarcinoma. This is the new adjuvant study that's coming up. So once again, adjuvant treatment is after you've had surgery and there's no sign of any trouble, but as we know, there is, I'm afraid, a reasonable high chance that the cancer will return, and you have some treatment to try and stop that from coming back. To date, currently, you've heard already this morning that people in this country receive capecitabine for this, 6 months of tablets. And this study compares the whatever you want chemotherapy, I'll explain that in a second, with or without this stuff. rilvegostomig, which is a type of immunotherapy. It's an immunotherapy tablet. Durvalumab and the other immunotherapies are drips. This is an immunotherapy tablet, and it's mixed in with another immunotherapy target. Most immunotherapy targets are PD-1 or PD-L1, programmed death receptor 1 or programmed death receptor ligand 1. This has got something called TIGIT on it as well. Very happy to take any questions. It gets a bit complicated. But this has got TIGIT on it, and the chemotherapy is a sort of whatever you want chemotherapy, because it's a global study, and in the States, for complex reasons, a lot of people get standard chemotherapy, cisplatin and gemcitabine, instead of the capecitabine. So this is already up and running. It's opened in various centers around the country, and please ask if you want to be directed towards it. So this is another study starting up. So this is looking at this is in advanced disease now, and this is in looking at patients with this HER2 abnormality. So Juan spoke a bit about this yesterday. So HER2 is one of the things we look for on the panel. It's positive in about 1 in 10 people with cholangiocarcinoma, and it's actually the test for this immunohistochemistry test is really very easy, and HER2 is responsible for about 1 in 5 breast cancers, and consequent upon this, we got some really good drugs for HER2. Arguably, as we spoke yesterday, arguably better than the chemotherapy that we have, although we have yet to prove this. This trial is trying to prove this. So it's yet another AstraZeneca study. So patients with advanced disease, they would normally get cisplatin, gemcitabine, and durvalumab, as we've described just now. Instead of this, they could get this stuff in HER2, which is a super drug that's targeted at the HER2. It's really good stuff. Or in HER2 with rilvegostomig. So this is the immunotherapy tablet that I described just now. So that's a really interesting study. I think still currently in development. I haven't seen any trace of it yet, unless my colleagues may tell me otherwise. I haven't seen any trace of it yet, but that's coming up. That'll be coming up soon. I think it's dependent on various logistical things around and HER2 registration and what have you. But that's interesting and should be, and once again, if you happen to have this, if you're the 1 in 10 that happens to have this, please ask. So we'll move on to the sort of what we call the targeted bit of the clinical trial landscape. That was the sort of less targeted bit. This is the more targeted bit. And this is something I showed yesterday, showing how many targets there are in cholangiocarcinoma. And this can be utilized to develop clinical trials. Our clinical trial, the ABC10 trial, is called Sapphire ABC10 because we're running it with the French. And it plans to treat people who have these alterations with one of several targets. I'll go into that in a second. There is a second-line protocol for those who fail this treatment with this stuff called ivonescimab, which is another one of these antibody-targeted treatments. So this has taken a very long time to develop, partly because we had to agree contracts with all of these different pharmaceutical companies, which we finally managed to do. And it gives you one of these drugs for each one of these abnormalities, which we reckon we will find in about somewhere between 1 in 3 and 1 in 2 patients. And so hopefully this will be starting up very soon. The problem that we've had is, curiously, EU regulation. The trial is sponsored by France, and consequently, there's been a lot of red tape around that. But hopefully, we will be starting this soon. And this is for people who start off with some chemotherapy. We do the tests. We find they have one of these alterations, and then they go on and get these things, a combination of tablets and drips. And we hope that this will really establish two things. One, the role of this targeted treatment in cholangiocarcinoma, and two, making sure that everybody gets tested for everything. That is ever so important, and currently it's clear that that really doesn't happen, but that is ever so important, and those are the two main aims of doing this big study. Some more. So this stuff, zanidatamab, is another HER2 drug. It's in competition to the AstraZeneca drug I showed you just now. And their plan is to do a study in first line. So patients who would normally receive the combination we saw earlier, the cisplatin gemcitabine with the immunotherapy durvalumab, half of them would be randomized to receive this extra drug, zanidatamab, which is a drip, extremely trouble-free drip, and that study is in planning, so it's nowhere near starting yet, but will be starting soon at some stage, I'm pretty sure, and again that's really promising. This is currently running, so this is a study with this stuff, ivosidenib. Ivosidenib we've heard little about. This is the drug that treats people with IDH1 mutations, so probably about something between 1 in 10 and 1 in 6 patients with cholangiocarcinoma will have this IDH1 mutation. Ivosidenib is recommended by NICE for treatment with the IDH1 mutation. This study adds a combination of immunotherapies to that tablet, to that ivosidenib tablet. And so the idea is, is the combination of immunotherapies and this ivosidenib tablet potentially better than just the ivosidenib alone? And I think we've recruited something like 5 patients. We're still in the sort of startup phase, and we're seeing how it's going. And so that's potentially very, very interesting. Trial hasn't got a name, I'm afraid, just this slightly user-unfriendly number. So that's up and running. This, and I promise this is the last of these horribly complicated slides. This tinangotinib is the FGFR2 resistance study. So FGFR2, we've heard about over the last couple of days already, has got one nice recommended drug for it, pemigatinib. There's another one hopefully coming up in the summer, futibatinib. The resistance to these drugs occurs through new mutations within the same gene. So the patients who receive this have what we call a fusion. The resistance comes through the development of mutations, and you can test for this with blood tests. And this stuff, on the face of it, and if you look at some of the detail here, and I'm happy to go through with anybody later if you want, works really, really well against these mutations. And so this stuff, tinangotinib, hopefully coming to, the ethics meeting is next week, I think. Hopefully starting up within the next month or so in this country for people who've got this, failed the standard NICE delivered treatment, and need to go on to something else. So that too will be available. Brightline 2 I told you about yesterday, people with an MDM2 abnormality. This is incredible stuff. This is one tablet every 3 weeks. So you take that if you have this MDM2 amplified abnormality, pardon me, you come to clinic. You have your blood test. You take the one tablet and you go away for 3 weeks. It is incredible stuff. I've never given treatment quite like that. So that is really, really promising. This. Also coming up, this stuff, again, we heard a little bit about yesterday. I won't go through this, but essentially you have to have the loss of something called MTAP. They reckon that's around 20%, and it's a combination of this stuff, AMG 131, together with chemotherapy in this population. I think particularly good because people who have MTAP loss quite often have this RAS abnormality for which we currently have no useful drugs. Here's a whole list of, by no means exhaustive list of other studies out there. And so, it's well worth looking if you're interested. I'm only going to say one thing about this, and that is, thank you, that 5 of these are targeted against HER2. So really, that's a really big growing area of activity. Thank you very much.